doing doing okay today. It's still fairly sunny here in Chicago. A little cold, getting ready for the holidays. I think they were predicting we were supposed to get some rain and snow, but so far so good. So hopefully everybody's able to get back and forth okay. Just a little bit about me. I've been in IT for quite a while, mostly in the web application development and project management, industries and business. Really, my job today with Peters and Associates is really working with organizations to find business solutions using technology, and it's a lot of fun around that, right? And actually today we're going to be talking about a business solution that hopefully you'll find you can solve some business problems with. So I wanted to start out with maybe a little bit of history, right? For those of you that have been working with Microsoft solutions for a while, particularly if you were working with like SharePoint and some of the other Office desktop apps, we used to have a business application called InfoPath. So InfoPath is an XML application designed to allow users to create forms, kind of using what you see is what you get, right? That WYSIWYG type of interface. I can click and drag and configure things. I can publish those out and then integrate that with Outlook. I could set up SharePoint tasks. I could kick off workflows, say from SharePoint Designer, and I could also embed custom actions and custom codes. So a lot of folks, built applications out of InfoPath. Unfortunately, back several years ago, Microsoft made a decision that they were no longer going to support the application and we're going to go take a new direction. So where does that kind of leave us today, right? So as business folks, there's definitely a business application development gap today, right? We're really living in a cloud first, mobile first world, right? People are definitely way more mobile than ever before. Everybody's got a smartphone. We've got all kinds of apps on our smartphone. And so organizations, they want to leverage that mobile first, that kind of agile type of business environment, and be able to create business applications on multiple devices. That allows us to leverage our business talent, regardless of wherever they're at, and through multiple devices. We want to be able to access data and workflow. People work remote today. Sales folks might be at a client. We might have, technical people working somewhere. We got business folks all over the place. And so, the ability to create business applications, quickly really can help improve our business agility, make us more successful, be able to provide, increase productivity, provide solutions. But there's a lot of challenges around the whole idea of business app development. There's a perception a lot of times that business applications they're hard to develop, right? We don't have the folks that can build those applications. The technology is just constantly changing, right? Not only just on the back end, but also on the front end. You think about all the different updates to the different platforms we have, like Office 365 and Apple platforms, iOS, the Google platforms. They're all changing constantly, and so it really does creates a challenge to allow have applications that we can create quickly and make those available across multiple platforms. And coming around with that is, from a pure developer standpoint, there really is a gap around, having developers that can go out and build these ground up mobile applications, and that's kind of true across the entire IT industry today. There's just not enough folks to get it done. We have a challenge with the data too, right? Many organizations now have information stored all over the place, right? We might have legacy systems on premise, ERPs, CRM systems. We've also got data that's stored out in the cloud. That might be an SAP solution, or could be in Azure. There's also the whole issue of trying to just make that connection to all those different pieces of data, and being able to consume that on a platform that makes sense to our business users. And obviously security is a huge concern today. You think about, you listen to all the all the terrible stories about folks getting emails compromised, and have an email being monitored, and then somebody taking that email account over and redirecting payments and things like that, or being at a Starbucks or someplace where you've got Wi-Fi and somebody's spoofing the IP and sending your information through there. So security is a huge concern, and also from an end user standpoint, the different applications, and related to security is, all the different logins and passwords and things that we're trying to work with, and the challenges it is for users to be able to remember their passwords and get to all the data and applications that they need. So from an IT standpoint, the distribution of applications is a challenge, right? We've got the problems of IT governance, making sure that we understand what applications are available and who's using them. A lot of organizations, have problems with shadow IT, where, going back to the, having the ability to be agile and deliver business applications in a timely manner. Departments will go out and they'll find applications that are already out there and start using them, and then you have the struggle of trying to maintain those, and all of a sudden it becomes the one more app that the IT team has to manage. Bringing together the data from different sources, and then securely kind of making these applications available outside the enterprise. So IT teams have they have a lot of challenges around managing those scenarios. So how do we address that? What are our opportunities to kind of create a solution to this problem? And Microsoft, through their Office 365 environment, has created a framework, essentially an application base where people can go out and create services through Office 365, make those available everywhere, and be able to create those business applications that most organizations really want. That solution is Microsoft Power Apps. So Power Apps is really intended to be a service, if you will, that a wide variety of different types of business people and technical people can utilize to create business applications, right? And it's really all about providing a tool that allows us to, connect to the data that we already own, right? It might be data that's stored in Office 365 and SharePoint. It could be, SQL database information that we have, on an on-premise server. It could be information that we're using from other types of cloud systems, right? CRMs or for other types of data sets. Be able to connect to those in a secure manner, and then have a framework that we can build applications on, and really around being able to do that with little or no coding, right? So this opens up the application to a much wider range of business users. You know, you think about the, you know, that old kind of label as a power user, you know, somebody who's, you know, not necessarily a technical person, but they have, you know, they have good technical acumen, they understand, you know, how applications can work, and we can make a, you know, we can make a framework available to them where they can create these applications and then publish them so that we can use them in a variety of venues, where we can make them available through the web on a browser. I can open up and interact with the application, you know, on a regular PC or a tablet. I could open it up in a mobile device, right? I could have, you know, I could have the application open and have a browser and have my screen and working on something else. So Power Apps is really, you know, all around, you know, creating apps with the concept of click, not coding, right? So you're going to have an interface that, you know, provides us this, you know, kind of an Excel-like tooling, you know, those kind of ideas of creating the application. We're going to be able to connect this securely to a variety of data systems that we already have out there, and through the Power Apps framework, we're going to be able to, you know, create applications and distribute them where we can access these, you know, really anywhere we need to, and with a secure method. Being able to run the application on multiple devices, and make it really easy for, once the application's been created, to allow users to access the app, be able to, you know, potentially install it locally on a phone or open it securely with a browser, and be able to make use of the application. So Power Apps is really, you know, it's intended for, you know, a number of different groups, right? Obviously, information workers, kind of your day-to-day staff who's working with data. You know, they're filling out forms, they're making decisions, you know, allowing folks like that to have the ability to create, you know, applications to support what they're doing. You know, business folks out there, you know, business analysts, folks that are trying to improve processes. They can certainly benefit from a platform like this, because and now again allows them to create more efficient business process and business workflow, and make that available to, you know, information workers and other users. And obviously, you know, professional developers, integration specialists, you know, more pure development types of people can obviously leverage this platform to quickly create, you know, new applications that they can get set up, they can get tested, and they can roll it out expeditiously.
15 minutes late.
So, in terms of technical skills, you know, it's really, you know, even for like your basic power user types of users, you know, folks that aren't necessarily, you know, have any technical development background, they can still, you know, leverage the skill sets that they've got today and use those in relationship to the Power Apps platform. You know, the ideas of you know, attaching or using data from an Excel spreadsheet, or accessing SharePoint lists and libraries is definitely something that almost anybody can accomplish. And then as we, you know, kind of move up the chain in terms of skill sets, you know, business optimizers, developers, you know, full-on integrators with, you know, for different systems, they can leverage their skill sets as well, and utilize, you know, more pure development activities, you know, writing C# code or Java, you know, JavaScript, things like that. So definitely a lot of people can utilize the platform. So basically, Power Apps is built out of three main components. The first component is the app designer. So this is the interface that a power user, or a developer would utilize to create the interfaces of the application. It gives us the ability to define the types of devices that we want to deploy our application on. It allows us to configure the presentation of the forms by dragging and dropping buttons, fields, other types of controls, images into our application, and then modifying the behavior of those components, right? I can change the color in the background of my button, or I can resize it, and I can do that by updating the properties of these individual components rather than having to sit there and write code in the background to make that happen. The second piece is the logic flow designer. So I'm able to utilize within the Power Apps application Microsoft Flow. Microsoft Flow is another application framework provided through Office 365, which allows us to create connections and capture information, allows us to create business workflow, again in the by implementing kind of WYSIWYG types of components. I can grab templates and things that have already been developed and configure them to work through to create my workflow. I can also create my own workflow components through the Flow application. Probably one of the biggest and most powerful capabilities of Flow is the facilitation of accessing information from a variety of sources, right? I can get data from SharePoint if I want to. I could connect through a gateway securely to a SQL Server database. I could get information that might be kicking off, say, from a Salesforce implementation, and through Flow, create maybe a library in a SharePoint environment or send an email. The third component is the app services environment. So this service layer exists through Azure, and it basically provides the components in the background to kind of integrate the connection to data, be able to create the work process, and then be able to deploy that through a Power Apps application, and while containing that all in a layer that is secured, is basically invisible through the application interface itself, and allows us really that tool set to access different types of data. Again, that data could be could be in-house, it could be on another system, it could even be housed through database applications and components that Microsoft is providing to us, right? So we could even access data that we don't have to set up. It's just materials that we can make use of. So kind of as that architecture for Power Apps development, what we have again is at the bottom we have these ideas of the systems that we're going to be accessing. Could be the existing back end, other types of cloud systems, on-premise databases, could be other types of applications such as Dropbox and other types of things that I'm going to pull in from, and then I utilize my app service environment to create, to be able to have the code base to create the applications through a series of APIs. Then from the end user's perspective, we can create multiple clients for our end users. Those can be, Power Apps applications. I can access things through the web or on mobile devices. I can utilize, desktop scenarios as well. So I've got this whole architecture that I can then, create and move application development and roll out, in a productive and efficient manner. So Power Apps has really been targeted to facilitate the creation of mobile applications. So when Microsoft was creating, the Power Apps framework, one of their key considerations was, providing the capabilities to be able to create, mobile applications that could be available across, multiple platforms, multiple operating systems, and, make those available where I could download, install it, and have my business users be able to securely, access that information and be able to perform those business activities through the app, through a framework. So this whole context allows us to move data back and forth in a secure manner, and makes that available, natively on many different types of mobile devices. So, kind of talking about getting into Power Apps and from a licensing perspective, and I know this is a little bit of an eye chart, but Power Apps is, utilized via the idea basically through Office 365 or through Dynamics 365. So in order to utilize Power Apps from a development and an end user's perspective, we're really looking at having some type of Office 365 licensing. Again, all of these, if you can see here on the left-hand side, all of these plans include Power Apps for Office 365. If you're using Dynamics, you've also got included in that, Power Apps licensing. Again, the level of license that you're purchasing, say, an E3 license versus an education A1, there will be some restrictions on kind of the amount of processing that you can do with Power Apps. So obviously, as you move up in the Microsoft stack from a licensing perspective, the more capacity, if you will, and processing you can do through Power Apps. It's important to also remember that in that licensing, Power Apps also includes Flow. So even in Office 365, you're going to have the Flow framework that integrates with Power Apps. And both of those tools are available. You can also purchase Power Apps as a standalone Office 365 application. So I've listed out, took a screenshot from the Microsoft site and kind of laid out the retail pricing on that. Obviously, if you've got an EA or other types of discounting out there, but you can potentially have Power Apps available to you as a single plan application. So in terms of using Power Apps, right? So I'm very, we talked about what it can do for us, how the types of business problems that it can solve. How do we do that? How do I get started in utilizing Power Apps as a tool for our organization? So essentially, you're going to utilize a development platform. There is both a online platform that you can work with, as well as a locally installed version of Power Apps. You'll see when we get into the demo a little bit, the Power Apps on locally installed will many times kick off certain components into the online version of Power Apps, and you can actually work effectively in either platform. I kind of started out doing a lot of my work in the locally installed version, and lately it's been almost entirely just Power Apps Online, where I'm just going in and working from really any web browser that I want to. So in creating applications in Power Apps, there's basically a couple of different approaches. Basically those are divided between the concept of Canvas apps versus model-driven apps, and the difference between these essentially is in the Canvas app, I'm basically starting out with my interface. So I'm gonna create the forms that I want to work with. I'm going to take those forms, I'm going to connect them to a data source, and then I'm going to modify all that, set up the application and publish it. The model-driven model starts out with the data source. So Microsoft makes templates available, starting out with a variety of data sources. So you kind of look at what you've got today, you connect to that via your the connection framework in Power Apps, say internally if you've got an internal scenario through a gateway, and then you use the app, you basically tell the application, here's the data that I'm working with, and then allow the application to automatically create the user interface. So a couple different approaches depending on kind of how you want to start and where you wind up with. The Common Data Service is part of the framework in the background and kind of that app layer or service layer. And the Common Data Service is essentially a data platform in Azure that you can utilize in a couple different ways. So you can use the Common Data Service as a method of storing data, right? So you could have fields and other types of information that you're capturing and store that in Microsoft's Common Data Service to be referenced or updated through your Power Apps. You can also leverage information that Microsoft is maintaining. They have data around geographical information, zip codes, other types of kind of general types of kind of data out there that a lot of folks would potentially access in order to capture the information and develop their platform. So you can utilize the Common Data Service potentially as a substitute to having a data source that maybe you own, right, like SharePoint Online, or say a SQL Server that you've got inside your environment. Again, I had mentioned a little bit earlier, part of Power Apps is Microsoft Flow. So Flow is basically a workflow framework, and it is designed to help facilitate a workflow process in many cases between a couple of different systems, right? So I can do things in one system. For example, here on our upper right, I could save an Outlook email attachment to my OneDrive, or I could send information to a SharePoint list. I could send information, I could get data from, a notification from Twitter and maybe send that out somewhere else. I could pull in information from, say, CNN. Microsoft is creating a lot of templates that can get you kind of bump started in creating your own kind of custom flows and workflows, and other folks are publishing those as well. So you've got this framework of workflow behind the scenes. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to go ahead and end my show. ahead and knock this down here, get rid of some of all my stuff. Dismiss that. I'll skip that piece of it. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at an application that I put together. It's a pretty simple app that we give you some idea of how you build out your Power Apps application. This is a time off request application. So the background of what you're seeing here is, for us, for Peters and Associates, we have a time off request app. We actually built it several years ago utilizing Microsoft SharePoint. So we have in our human resources website, we have a SharePoint list that is managing the data for our time off requests. And we created on top of that a web interface utilizing SharePoint list item forms, right? So that was kind of our version 1. Our developer went in, she made some adjustments using JavaScript to the out-of-the-box SharePoint forms, and we go in, we fill out our data, and we go ahead and submit that. So what I did was I said, well, that's a great scenario to utilize Power Apps, right? Because I can create my screens, I can connect to my data source, I can utilize workflows, and I can create that application as a substitute for the SharePoint-based app that we originally created. So what we're looking at is the online version of the application platform. So I actually started this development by leveraging the ability to create a Power App directly from a SharePoint list. So I'm going to jump over here to our SharePoint list that we have here, and you can see I've got a time off request sitting out there, but I could actually start this development process directly from a SharePoint list. You can see this is in the modern experience, and you can see I have my Power Apps option where I could go in and I could actually start to create an app. So I could launch that. It's going to launch the application. What's going to happen then with that launch is it's going to create a couple of base screens, and it's going to send me through the concept of connecting to my data source. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an idea of what that looks like. So in File, I went ahead and I loaded up my connections. So what the application will do, since when I've launched it from our time off list, the application would recognize that I'm in SharePoint, I've launched from that particular list, and it will send you through a dialog to create a connection, and that's what this is down at the bottom. This is my connection to the application to do the development of the app. It securely logs me into SharePoint, and all of the Office 365 security configurations that you may have put in place. For example, if you have multi-factor authentication running within, say, your SharePoint or your Office 365 environment, when I connect to do the development, it's going to ask me to authenticate, provide my MFA code, and creates that secure connection for me to do my development. So go ahead and back out of that. launch that apps again. So you can see just to give you an idea of kind of what the application looks like. So we have a series of screens. The first one is, allows me to come into the application and provides a couple of buttons. So I can move through submitting a time off request from the screen using this button, or as a manager, I can view pending time off requests. So if I click our time off request form, what this is doing is it is presenting a series of fields. These fields are tied back to a connection to fields in my SharePoint list. I can set required pieces of information. So let's just, I'll just go ahead and update this one. So it's supposed to allow me to update that. And we'll just say that is the 12th. I'm going to take the 14th off. Number of days is 16. I can do a half-day request if I want to. Any special notes here, I'm going to go ahead and say that is a test. And I could submit my form. So what this will do then through the connection that we saw in SharePoint, connected in SharePoint, the code is going to go ahead and it's going to submit these fields to the SharePoint list we have in the background. And then that will kick off a workflow that then sends an email request to the manager, and then they can respond to any of those requests. So I'm just going to go ahead and reset this, and I'm going to get out of it, and I'm going to show you then our pending time off requests. So let's see if we can get that to refresh a little bit. So our requests basically show up, and I can go in, I can search for items, but I can also open up any requests that were out there, and I can see data that was pulled back in from that request item. So you can see for here, for example, this is just an older version, test information. You can see that I have the ability here to approve or disapprove this particular request, and then once I've made my comments, said yes or no, I could go ahead and submit that item. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. So that is our application. Oop, probably shouldn't have set that up. We'll sign off here. Hopefully I won't have to log back in again. Let's see if we get lucky. All right. So let's go ahead and we're going to go back to the edit field here. Oops, it is going to make me log back in. So let me sign in, and because we have MFA enabled, the man don't pay attention to the man behind the scenes, but he is approving his SharePoint request. It's just a second here. Okay. Running a little slow today. There we go. There we go. There, it's working. I'm going to go ahead and override that. Okay. So now we're back into the editing components. So the design of this particular application consists of four screens. So I have a welcome screen, a time off submitting screen, a review screen to see all of my open requests, and then a screen that allows me to approve my my requests. And let's see here, are you going to work? Okay, so let's take, so one of the things that I could do is I could insert in here a new screen. So we have a wide variety of different types of screens that are available. And again, kind of think about this in the concept of, you know, a power user wanting to have a template, if you will, to kind of get started displaying information. So I could certainly start out with a blank screen and build off of that, but I also have a variety of other types of screens that I could work from. So for example, I could add a screen here that would be for a tutorial. So if we look at the welcome screen, basically in interacting with this particular screen, we have a variety of different layers here. And those layers are accessed by clicking into the various components of the screen. So if you notice that when I click into the button that I have here, view pending time off requests, I'm getting some information. Primarily what this is showing me is, do I have any functions that this particular button on the screen should do. In this case, we have a navigate function, which sends us, you can see here, its argument is sends us to the Open Request 1 screen, which is down here. And I can also say whether I wanted that to open up separately. There's some other components that we can have there. You'll also notice then here on the right-hand side, we have properties of the individual button itself. So I have the properties of what the text looks like. I have the properties of, you know, display mode, edit, view, so on and so forth. I can turn my button on and off. I have the ability to set the size and position in my screen. I can update the colors, the borders, you know, what my alignment is. I can also potentially upcoming set rules for our application. This is coming soon. And then on my advanced screen, I can also see kind of a summary of some of the other components in relationship to my particular button. So for example, if I scroll down, it's going to give me all of those different ways that I can change and manage the presentation of my button. So what's really great about this is, unlike having to go in and modify a style sheet, you know, writing HTML code, you know, for all of these components, as a power user, I now have a very rich capability of modifying the presentation of the form simply by updating properties. So you can see here we have a text label. Each one of these, if I kind of click through them, you can see the individual components that we're working with, my buttons, all of that kind of thing. We'll go ahead and go to our time off 1 request. And again, this is a different type of form. It's supplied with a number of basically what are called cards, which are the connections in the background to SharePoint information. So for example, if I click into this, we look at the properties. This is allowing us to kind of see what the different configurations are for each of our fields. You can see here the data connection. I can see the different fields that I have available. If I look at my time off end date, I can again see how the data has been conformed or configured, and again all of my capabilities to set up the data or the display configuration of my card. Again, down here we have again a couple of buttons. In this one, our submit form function is going to send this information back to the SharePoint list that we are connected to. And if I reset, our function is basically going to go ahead, take the edit form and set it back to number 1. So going on here quickly, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the other feature sets. We'll go ahead and bring our proof screen up. Or sorry, I actually want to look at our open requests. So if we open this up to our setup here, again you can see time off request, our search information, look at the properties of that functionality. I want to go ahead and I've outlined this particular component because this is actually, I wanted to kind of give you an example of some of the error checking and editing that you can do. So when I selected this, you'll notice that the application is giving me a little warning here. It's saying that there's a problem with my process here. And basically what I'm trying to accomplish in this presentation is I'm saying I want to sort my list of time off requests by the created date, and I want to see that descending. Now you can see currently I've got a whole bunch of just different pieces in here. As I go through here, the filter is saying show me from the time off requests based on a filter of a field I have in my SharePoint list called Power App Filter equals 1. So my time off request, when it's submitted, updates a field with the value of 1 to designate that I have an open request, and then I can pull that in from my Power Apps application. But you can see here, if I mouse over this particular item, it's saying this is an incompatible type. We can't evaluate the formula because the left value, the Power App filter, is a number, but you've given me on the right side a text type. So I've got, literally it says equal with the quotes. So if I remove these, let me go back into that field again. Now you can see everything's looking like it's working properly. So I could then go ahead and save my application and then make that available. I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to go ahead and save my application. So at that point, once I've gone through the development process, I have the ability to go in and publish the application. So the publication process then makes the application available through the Power Apps interface. So if you envision kind of what this would mean, and I'll just go ahead and we'll publish that. And you can see here, it'll make this version available to everyone who has can use permissions. So essentially, through the Power Apps interface in Office 365, all of my users who have been set up to access these applications could now access them and potentially download and install them on devices. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this version. So that's changes have all been saved and published. So from kind of that end user's scenario there, I could go out, I could see what are all the different types of applications that I have available, and you'll notice that one of those is my Peters and Associates time off request. It gives you a little bit of an idea of what that is. Again, I could run that from the browser if I wanted to. I could also potentially download and install that if I was on a mobile device and bring that down and do a local install, or run it through the browser in my mobile device. So, no, that was kind of a quick walkthrough of the application. Hopefully it kind of gave you a little bit of a kind of a basic idea of, kind of how something like this would work. You can, again, start out with some SharePoint stuff if you've got that. Go ahead and use some of those tools to create those pieces. Final item that I wanted to just touch base on about this, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to questions, is I'm going to go back into my time off edit form. So one of the options that you've got, I talked a little bit about Microsoft Flow, is you can embed within your application flows, right? So for example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to select my reset button. And so my function currently says reset the form, create a new form, but I have the ability to go in and I could insert through my actions menu a flow. So what the app's going to say is, you want to create a new flow? Fantastic. Let's go ahead and do that. So it's going to go ahead and launch the Flow application, Microsoft Online. Hopefully this is going to come up without us having to burn up 2 or 3 days to do it. It was coming in pretty quickly. And so now it knows that I'm interacting with this Power Apps button. So when I click that reset, it's going to do something. So to give you an idea of how this works, I'm going to go ahead and select my new step. And so we'll let that grind for just a little bit. And what this is going to do is it's going to show us the different types of actions or triggers that I can potentially put in place. I'll quickly just show you a few examples of these. For example, if I select Microsoft Office 365 Outlook, I've got a variety of different features that I can potentially do from here, right? I could say, hey, I want to, add a contact or send an email, get tips, get room lists. All of these, again, kind of have that WYSIWYG functionality. So if I click into send an email, this is going to go ahead and provide me with a set of features that I can specify what would happen with this email. So I could say, for example, just to do this quickly, I'll just say, hey, I'm going to put in, it looks and sees Chris Cummins. Because I'm logged in, I could put my subject in. I can potentially have dynamic content associated with that. I'll just quickly do these so you can kind of see what this might look like. The body, right? That type of thing. It's pretty quick and easy. I can add all of those components, and then I could go ahead and save that flow, or I can add additional steps. And again, that might be based on the concept of a trigger, right? And again, if I click something in SharePoint, the ideas of that become, hey, I could go out, and when something happens in relationship to this time off request, maybe there was an update to the list itself, I could then have some type of action happen. So pretty quick and easy to be able to embed within your forms that you're creating Microsoft Flow. I'm going to go ahead and get out of that so I don't tear up what I've got in place. One other quick example, and then we'll open it up. I did create a flow from the SharePoint list, just again, kind of those basic kinds of concepts. If we go ahead and select this and edit it, this application really quickly just basically says, hey, I'm connected to, to my SharePoint list, and when an item is modified or created in that list, you see there's my HR list there and the list name, I can send an email. Again, if we just kind of open that up, there's some information there, and I've added in some dynamic content. Very quick and easy to work with.